What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2022 Toyota Corolla Cross. Huge thanks to Toyota for providing me here with this opportunity to review the Corolla Cross for you guys today. So about the Corolla Cross, well, this is an entirely new model that slots in between the CHR and the RAV4. So as far as the sizing and everything, it's right in the middle there between all those. So it's about 5 inches shorter than a RAV4, but about 3 inches longer than a CHR. And of course, compared to the CHR, this is a lot more rugged. Right up front, I first got to say that it looks really cool with these very large LED headlamps, and LED headlamps are standard across the board. So even if you go for an absolute base model, you'll still have really good nighttime visibility, which is something a lot of the competitors don't offer. But this one is a top trim XLE model, so this gives you this daytime running light here, which is only on the XLEs, and so that's a nice touch. You also get LED fog lights here on the XLE as well. And I also gotta say, I love this cypress green color. It's really refreshing to see a color other than a red or a blue, and then the usual silvers and blacks. And so I really love this color. It has a nice metallic sparkle here in the sun, and yeah, just a very bold grille up front there. It definitely, I think, is inspired by the RAV4 a good bit as well, which makes a lot of sense considering just how insanely popular the RAV4 is. Coming down to the sides, you have these 18-inch alloy wheels here on the XLEs. You'll go down to 17s on the lower trims, and these wheels look really nice though. I like how they have those little indentations in them there and the little bit of an interesting design to those. And also the body cladding on here and all that is very appropriate for this vehicle. It has over 8 inches of ground clearance, by the way, so it actually will be able to clear a decent amount of obstacles, and has a little more ground clearance than a lot of the other competitors in this segment have. I really like these C shapes you have cut into both the front fender here and the rear fender, and it's a very cool touch, and you'll see the silhouette of that little Easter egg actually all over this vehicle in various spots. I also love on the side profile there how you have this chrome strip that runs up along the roofline there and blends into a nice little Corolla Cross badge there on the C-pillar. You'll also see that this one has roof rails. That is something that you do get on the LE and the XLE. But then going out to the back there, I think it also continues to look very nice. You have LED taillights there as standard, which is great, and a typical kind of more boxy back end to this vehicle, which is really great. And yeah, I just think overall from every angle it's gonna really fit in with what people are wanting. I think people that wanted a subcompact crossover that was a little more rugged than the CHR, I think this is going to be perfect for people who don't need something as large and as expensive as the RAV4. This kind of comes in very nicely to fill that gap in between. And so overall, yeah, I think it's a really nice looking little vehicle. For the interior of the Corolla Cross here, it's very familiar if you're used to any 2019 or newer Corolla. It is like they took all of the exact components. The dashboard is a little bit taller here to accommodate, the taller shape of this interior, but all the stuff that you interact with and stuff is identical to a regular Corolla, which is a very good thing. They really upped the game with the Corolla here a couple of years back, and so it's a really nice interior overall. But first thing, sitting down in these seats, this one has the optional mocha and macadamia color for these seats. And so this is the XLE, again, has these soft text seats. If you go for an LE or an L, you get cloth seats. And these seats though, the soft text doesn't do the best impression of leather. It's a little more vinyl-y than I would like, but again, we are in a vehicle that starts in the low 20s, and then this one, again, even fully loaded at 28. This is still appropriate for this price segment. And they seem to be pretty comfortable seats here so far. They do have adjustable lumbar support, as well as the usual other power adjustments here on the XLE version, and they're also heated here on the XLE as well. The steering wheel is also really nice here, again, identical to any other Corolla, and so that just means you have a really nice 9-3 grip, nice little 10 and 2 notches, just your usual Toyota buttons here on the front of the wheel for audio controls and the safety stuff, and that's basically it. So it is nice that it's leather wrapped here. That is something that you get when you go to the LE version. If you go for a base model, it won't be leather wrapped. The gauges are also really nice here in the XLE. This one gets these 7-inch color digital cluster here in the middle. If you go for L or LEs, you'll just have analog gauges with a little digital portion there on the right hand side. But both gauges work fine. These ones are nice here, just because you have a little bit larger display for your trip information, audio information. But the base gauges show you all the same stuff. So it's cool to look at here. And you can also, if you don't like the analog style for the speedometer, you can also just go to a normal digital speedometer there and simplify that look a little bit if you'd like. And yeah, they're totally fine gauges either way you go, and I do like the blue backlighting here though on these. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, so right up top you'll see this 8-inch touchscreen infotainment system here, which is standard in the LE and XLE. You'll go for a 7-inch screen in the base L model, but they both run the same software, and they both have standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Now it is still wired in smartphone integration. It's not wireless. Some of the newest competitors out there are wireless, like the Chevy Trailblazer and the Volkswagen Taos, but aside from a couple of them, everything else is basically plugged in still. Hopefully Toyota will update this to wireless someday, but in the meantime, it works really good. I just like that this system is nice and simple. You have the hard buttons here, you have volume and tune knobs, to jump around to stuff a lot easier, and it's not going to wow you or anything. There are some competitors that have more impressive displays, but this works fine. And again, most people are just going to plug in their phone, use the smartphone integration, and not bother with the rest most of the time. And so for this, I think it's totally good. Coming down, you have your climate controls here, which are dual zone auto climate in the XLE. LE is auto but single zone, and then if you go for a base model, it'll be manual controls. But all of them, work great, and especially here though in these higher trims, just really nice knobs here. I like the little bit of a metal trim you have here for the other buttons. It's just very simplistic, but it still does everything you need it to do. I love how simple this is, and I think it's really attractive too. You also see some nice soft touch material here with some stitching and stuff on the dashboard, and it's just nice that it's padded. It just gives a little more of a premium quality feel, and even on the doors and stuff here, it's padded a little bit more, and so it gives it a a little bit more of a higher quality feel and a more luxurious feel, although you still have plenty of hard plastic up here on the top of the dash, down by your knees. All that kind of stuff is all hard. But, again, we're talking about a vehicle that's in the mid-20,000s, so, very much par for the course. Coming down, you'll see your heated seat controls as well as a USB jack, and in the LE and XLE here, you'll see the wireless charging pad. If you don't have a wireless charging pad, you'll actually get an extra USB jack here in the center armrest, but whenever you get the wireless charging pad, you lose out on that extra USB jack. But, the wireless charging pad, by the way, is okay. I wish that it was more rubberized, both to hold your phone in better and so it doesn't scratch up your phone as much if you don't have a case on it, but it's okay. It's also not the biggest slot. I just have an iPhone 11 Pro, which isn't massive by any means, and as you can see, it barely really fits in there. So if you had a really large smartphone, that might not be super practical for you. So just have to see how your phone will fit in there. Cargo space is also pretty good here for this segment. You have a nice large pocket in the door with a bottle holder. Coming over to the center here, though, all you have is just those two cup holders. Unless you don't have the wireless charging pad, then you'll have that extra cubby there. But the thing is, with that wireless charging pad, which you can turn off, but if you have it on, you're not able to really put anything else in there, especially metal items. Then you have your center armrest, which has a little bit of padding on it, but it's also pretty hard plastic underneath. Nothing feels super luxurious in this class other than the Mazda CX-30, but just wish there was a little more padding there. But anyway, you open that up and you'll see a decent sized little cubby there, as well as a normal 12-volt power outlet, and so nice to have that in there. And again, you would get an extra USB jack in there in the lower trims. If you need to have more places to put things, there's always the back seat. And moving on to that back seat here in the Corolla Cross, it's actually, I think, one of the biggest subcompact crossover back seats in this segment. I think honestly this back seat is what's going to sell a lot of Corolla Crosses, because everything else in this segment for the most part is pretty cramped, with a few exceptions, like the Subaru Crosstrek, the Kia Seltos. A few like that have a little bit more, rear legroom. The Volkswagen Taos also has a pretty good amount of rear legroom. I'd say this is right towards the top of the pack and kind of matches most of those best-in-class rear legroom amounts. I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I have about 3 inches or so of legroom to spare back there, so pretty good amount of room. I also have a decent amount of headroom as well, even with this one having the optional moonroof. If you didn't have the moonroof, you'd probably have a little bit even more space there for your head, but plenty of headroom like you'd expect from an SUV. Also, another thing that's really great when you look forward, you'll see standard rear air vents. That's something that most of the competitors definitely don't make standard, and if they do have it available, it's only on higher trims. In the Corolla Cross, it's standard across the board. I love that. If you have anyone that sits in the back seat on a hot day or even on a cold day, having those air vents is crucial. And that is another thing that could potentially sell a lot of Corolla Crosses for that feature alone. You'll also see they have great connectivity back there as well. You have 2 USB jacks back there. One is a USB-C and one is a regular Type A USB. Interesting that you have one of each back there, because that's the only USB-C jack in this entire vehicle is in that back there. But nice to have those. That is something you get on these higher trims. I don't believe you get the USB jacks on a base model. You also don't get the center armrest on lower trims. That's only on XLE. You get the center armrest there with the 2 cup holders, but into it. Otherwise, you have little cup holders there in the tops of the doors, no other pockets there in those doors, so also a little less space than you might get in some other competitors that usually have larger pockets in those rear doors. Going out to the cargo space here in the Corolla Cross, it's another strong suit here of this vehicle for sure. Again, probably not the largest trunk in this segment. I think Volkswagen Taos has it beat for sure, and that's really one of the best in class as far as space goes in the back. But I mean, this is still a good amount of space, I'd say. You know, it's pretty long, pretty wide for this segment. The only thing is, you know, you have those pockets there on the sides, but the floor is a little shallow, and you would think maybe there'd be a pocket or something whenever you lift up the floor there, but unfortunately all you see is your spare tire. It's great that you have a spare tire here in this though, because that's something that isn't always a guarantee in other vehicles. So good you have an actual spare tire there, and you have a couple little tiny pockets there scattered throughout the rest of that little cutout, but that's about it. So, you know, it's going to definitely be better than a Corolla hatchback, that's for sure. You know, it has a much smaller hatch than this does. So it's pretty good. Again, I don't think it's best in class as far as its cargo capacity, but if you are curious, it does have 26.5 cubic feet of cargo capacity to be exact. So great to have that. You can also fold down those rear seats. It's 60-40 split for the fold on all models, and so you can drop that down to have some more cargo space if you don't need that back seat. It's also optionally a power liftgate. Only on the XLE, it's an extra option on an XLE in order to have that power liftgate. But yeah, so I mean, overall, it's a pretty nice interior. Again, I think that it's not the nicest in this segment. I think the Mazda CX-30 definitely has this beat. That feels like a mini luxury car for the money. But I think compared to most of the other competitors out there, this is going to, you know, compare very favorably again, especially as far as the space goes. And it's overall a really good interior. All right, so let's start up and go for a drive. The Corolla Cross here just has this nice Toyota key. It's a little bit of a newer key here, and not too thick or anything though, and nothing on the back of it there. But a really nice key, and you do get the smart key on LE and XLE. If you go for a base model, you still get a non-smart key and a twist to start. So if you're someone who likes the actual physical key, you can still get that in a base model. Otherwise here, it's all proximity key, which is really nice. So of course, you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off here in the Corolla Cross. So the first thing that I'm kind of noticing here, so all these models run a CVT transmission. In my opinion though, I really love the CVT, especially in the regular Corolla when it debuted, because it has a real first gear. So what that means is from the very first moment you set off in one of these vehicles with this transmission, you're gonna have that instant response of you hit the gas and you go, just like you expect, without any kind of mushiness to the transmission like you often get with other CVTs. And so it means that it's very predictable from a stop. Interestingly though, with this one, for some reason, it seems like whenever I start from a stop, there's some times where, I mean, I immediately go, but then I'm having to push the gas down a lot more in order to get it to actually start accelerating, and it just feels like it kind of bogs down a little bit, and then it's like, oh wait, and then it kind of gives me a downshift with the CVT to actually, you know, spring into action and give me the power that I'm looking for. So it feels a little sluggish sometimes around town, but I will continue to drive that here. Just my very first initial impressions. Other things though that are very good as far as initial impressions go are the visibility here in the Corolla Cross is spectacular. So you have a nice high seating position, a good bit higher than a CHR, for example, and feels very RAV4 like, even though this is a little bit lower than a RAV4, it's not a huge difference. And so you just have that nice upright seating position, but a great view forward. Nice thin A-pillars with little windows there and the mirrors off onto the doors. So I mean, an excellent view forward, and view out of the back is also, you know, really good in typical SUV fashion with that, you know, nice large hatch. And so, you know, it's a very easy vehicle to drive. It also doesn't feel too big or anything as far as width goes. It's about an inch more narrow than a RAV4. So it's going to be a very easy vehicle to live with, especially when you're, you know, doing around town kind of city stuff. But even when you're out on the open road, it's just, you know, nice and easy to place in your lane and all that. You do also have the full suite of safety tech here with Toyota Safety Sense 2.0 that's standard. So that means you have like the lane keeping assist with the lane departure alert, but it has the lane tracing assist where it'll actually help you stay in your lane a little bit. I'll have to test that out a little bit more, but in previous Toyotas, it's not quite as proactive as some other systems are. But, you know, it gives you a little bit of help there if you do need a little bit of extra assistance, or you just like, you know, the safety net. But it also has like adaptive cruise control as standard, even in a base model, which is very, very impressive. Blind spot monitoring is also standard here on LE and XLE. It's not on the base model, unfortunately. Along with that blind spot monitoring, you also do get the rear cross traffic alert, and then on XLE versions, you actually get an automatic braking function for that, as well as parking assist with sonar. Will give you the little beeps to let you know whenever you're approaching obstacles, and can actually automatically brake at speeds under 9 miles per hour if it thinks you're going to hit a pole or something else whenever you're parking. And speaking of that safety equipment, we're out on the highway here now, so I will turn the lane tracing assist on here, as well as turning on the adaptive cruise control system. We'll see how that does here. So yeah, see, it's like still letting me go over the lines here, so it's not doing the active steering that I would like to see, and what some of the, again, the best systems do. But the adaptive cruise system works very well. It's the same system you get in a Corolla and other vehicles like that, where, you know, it will automatically adjust the speed depending on the car in front of you. Another thing though that is interesting is, you know, the power here in the Corolla Cross. So we're running a 2-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine. It does 169 horsepower, 150 pound-feet of torque, and as far as the horsepower number goes, that's actually a little bit more than what you get on most of the base motors from a lot of the competitors. So a lot of the competitors do around 150-ish horsepower. So this gives you, you know, a dozen or maybe 20 more horsepower than some of them. And so that is nice to get that extra power here. But the thing is, a lot of the competitors do have more powerful options, and many of those will give you, you know, horsepower that's in the 180s or even close to 200 horsepower in some of them. And so, you know, this doesn't feel super punchy. In the regular Corolla, it got like a mid 8 seconds 0 to 60 time. This is pretty similar in weight for a front wheel drive version, but whenever you add on that all wheel drive system, it's about 170 pounds extra. And so, you know, like this one with the all wheel drive has that extra weight. I mean, it's fine, you know, I mean, it's an average little crossover, you know, it's not going to be too sporty or anything, and no one's expecting it to really be sporty, but, you know, just passing power, I mean, you can't be afraid to floor this car. You know, you floor it and then it gets moving, and, you know, it'll hustle for you, but, you know, it doesn't feel particularly punchy, and even some of the competitors these days are turbocharged, and so that'll give you really nice low-end grunt, which is sorely lacking here in this, unfortunately, but it's livable, you know, I mean, for most people it's going to be totally fine, I think, and it's not a big deal, you know, for someone shopping in this segment of vehicle. But one thing that I do have to point out, though, is if you still want to be even at the lowest price point of, you know, around $23,000 or so, you can get a Mazda CX-30, and even that base model gives you a 2.5-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder with 186 horsepower. Plus, you get a regular 6-speed automatic, so there's no CVT stuff like you get with this. You know, it's always going to be giving you normal shifts with a normal automatic in that CX-30. So if you're someone who wants the most power for the least amount of money in this segment, check out the CX-30 for sure. I'll talk more about how this compares to its competitors later in this video. The model I'm driving right now is an LE all-wheel drive. As far as that all-wheel drive system goes, it is actually an option on all 3 trims. It's $1,300 extra on each trim, and you know, as far as the all-wheel drive system goes, it's a pretty standard system here that Toyota uses in like the RAV4, in the regular versions of the RAV4 that don't have the high-end system, at least. And so it's a system that can send up to 50% of the torque to the rear if it needs to. It also can disconnect the rear, so it'll just be front-wheel drive only to give you the best fuel economy possible. So it all comes down to, you know, what it deems are, you know, the circumstances and what it needs to do. And so it's, you know, just very nice to have that all-wheel drive sure-footedness here. So it's also interesting because whenever you go to the all-wheel drive model, you get a different suspension than what you get in the front-wheel drive versions. The front-wheel drive models get a torsion beam rear suspension. It's a little bit simpler. And then if you go for the all-wheel drive versions, you'll get a multi-link rear suspension. And so the multi-link rear will also help you with handling a little bit, theoretically. If you go for a front-wheel drive version, it's about as light as a regular Corolla sedan. And then even with the all-wheel drive here, like this one is equipped, you know, it's going to be right around 3,300 pounds. So still pretty light these days. But we have some tighter corners here. Sample the handling here. And I gotta say, it handles itself pretty well. I mean, even this LE is only on 17-inch wheels, so you don't have the bigger 18s, which might handle a slightly bit better with their lower profile tires and stuff. But I mean, these are still 225 wide tires on these, so still has a little bit more meat than what you might actually get on some of the competitors. And you know, I just really love the handling here in this because it's just very predictable. It's just very what you expect. It just does what you want it to do. It's still pretty flat, though. I think this handles a little bit better than stuff like a Volkswagen Taos, which I recently reviewed, and that kind of was a little bit more wobbly and stuff. I think that this actually has nice, confident handling. I think the steering is the perfect weight, not too heavy, not too light, just right. You know, brakes also have a very confident feeling to them. You start tipping into the brake pedal and it gives you an immediate response there, but it's still very easy to be smooth with the brakes. And so yeah, I mean, you know, and even hitting little potholes and, you know, manholes manhole covers, things like that. You know, it's still a very comfortable vehicle. It's also, I mean, this road's pretty smooth, but it's also a pretty quiet ride in here, and that's something that's uncanny for this segment. But I think it's a really nice ride for this segment of vehicle. I think it's actually, you know, a little bit above what you get on most of the others. But let's turn down onto this back road here and do an acceleration, see how it does. Here we go. So it's pretty responsive, and I mean, this engine is definitely very eager and willing. It just, again, doesn't have a lot of power down low. But once you get in those upper RPMs and it really starts working hard for you, you know, I'd say it's, you know, pretty good. And again, horsepower is really where this is going to win out over the base engines and a lot of the other vehicles. But again, if you do want more power, CX-30 gives it to you as standard with 186 horsepower on that. And then a lot of the other competitors like the Seltos, the Kona, those will give you turbo engines that have, you know, about 180 horsepower, but they do have 195 pound-feet of torque, way more torque than this, and those are going to feel a lot punchier, a lot quicker. So the last two things I mentioned here about the Corolla Cross are fuel economy and pricing. So as far as fuel economy goes, it's going to be, you know, pretty good for this segment. It gets in the low 30s. The exact fuel economy numbers here for a front-wheel drive version are going to be 31 in the city, 33 on the highway, and 32 combined. If you go for the all-wheel drive, you give up 2 in the city, so it goes down to 29 mpg. But on the highway, you only give up 1. It's 32 there, and you'll do 30 mpg combined there in the all-wheel drive version. And so, I mean, pretty good amount of fuel economy. You know, I think it really helps that these are naturally aspirated engines here in the Corolla Cross, so that means it's more predictable. Whereas some of the other turbocharged competitors may test a little bit better, but then in the real world, whenever you're using that turbo boost, it just kind of tanks the fuel economy. With this, what you see is what you get, and so I think that, you know, it's going to help you to, you know, get a little bit better fuel economy here in the real world with this naturally aspirated engine. And it's also a simpler engine, so I think from a reliability standpoint, having the naturally aspirated engine certainly will help you as well. Then the last thing to mention here is the pricing in the Corolla Cross, which I have to say is very competitive, I think. So including destination, these start at $23,410, and then if you want that all-wheel drive, again, that's $1,300 extra, and so that'll put you just under $25,000 for a base model with all-wheel drive. And I think that base model is actually probably one of the best values in the lineup because, you know, like I said, you get the rear air vents as standard, you get the standard CarPlay and Android Auto, you get the same engine, you get a lot of great safety technology there, and so I mean, it's really good. Now even like the fully loaded XLE, which had all the options on it, you can get, there's several different option packages. There's a convenience package which gives you like a moonroof and the power tailgate, and then there's also another package for the JBL stereo. And so with those packages all on there, that one was just under $31,000 with everything. And I have to say, this JBL stereo, I'm gonna have to have more time to actually sample it and see how it sounds, but regardless of, even if it's the most amazing stereo on the planet in this segment, it's still, the upcharge for the JBL stereo is $1,465. Almost $1,500 for a stereo upgrade is kind of crazy in just about anything outside of luxury cars, and even with some of the luxury cars you pay less for a stereo upgrade. So that's kind of insane. I don't really honestly see many people going for that JBL option since it's just so expensive. And so when you get rid of that, it, you know, drops even an XLE with all those other options beneath $30,000. And like this LE all-wheel drive has this JBL stereo as well. And in this one, even with the stereo though, you're looking at about $28,500. So knock off that stereo, you're sitting right at 27 grand on the dot almost. You know, with all-wheel drive and still having the LE features of the, you know, the blind spot monitoring and you know, the auto climate control, things like that. I think it makes a lot of sense at 27 grand as well. And again, this one does still have that all-wheel drive. If you'd like to see a full trim comparison between the 3 different models, I actually have a video already posted a couple months back showing back to back what all the different trims look like, you know, the features you get on all of them, and I kind of break down all of that. So if you're curious to, you know, figure out which trim you would like to get, definitely check out that video. I'll link it above. So I think it's very competitive. I mean, I think the only one, again, that does undercut this slightly is the CX-30. That you can actually get for a couple $100 cheaper, and like I said, you get more power in those, you have a more luxurious interior, and you know, I will say it's a smaller interior. I think you have a much more cramped back seat in the CX-30 compared to this, so it just comes down to how much you're going to use that back seat. Same thing goes for the hatch. Not as roomy of a hatch in the CX-30, but if you don't need the most space possible in your subcompact crossover, I still think CX-30 is the better value value. But aside from that, I think this is a fantastic value. Again, you get more power than when you get in like a base Subaru Crosstrek, which starts at a very similar price tag. So I think it is very competitive. Now, I will say that there are kind of like the subcompact crossovers in this segment that are front wheel drive only. And so if you're open to front wheel drive and having a vehicle that's a little bit smaller, you know, there are some that do undercut this, like the Hyundai Venue, the Nissan Kicks, stuff like that. Those you can get basically like fully loaded for like 24 grand with everything. So those are going to undercut this by a good bit, but they are also smaller. But I think those vehicles do a pretty good job of packaging and you know, still have a decent amount of space, especially the Hyundai Venue. I was pretty impressed just how spacious that vehicle was, although you still are going to have a lot less cargo space than something here like the Corolla Cross. But just worth mentioning, if front wheel drive is an option for you and you don't need the most amount of space, you just want that higher seating position, there are some others out there that do undercut this still by a little bit. Whenever you consider the Toyota reliability and the indestructible nature generally you get with Corollas, which also extends here to the Corolla Cross, I think this is going to be a really solid option. It's also most likely going to depreciate a lot less than most of the competitors because Toyota has such strong resale values. And so that's also something to keep in mind. You know, if you either plan to keep the vehicle forever, it'll be really reliable, but even if you don't plan to keep it forever, it should hold its value better so that whenever you turn around to sell it down the road, you know, you'll probably get a little bit more money back as well. So this is a vehicle you can kind of have as a better investment than some of the others. I think it just is a really nice little thing. I think they're going to sell a ton of these Corolla Crosses because, again, it's just so competitive with the pricing. You get great fuel economy. You still get the great ground clearance, the boxier SUV shape, and the rugged looks that I think people really love in this segment of vehicle now. And I think that it just makes a lot of sense and is going to be, yeah, a huge hit. And but yeah, so that's about all of my thoughts here on the Corolla Cross. Let me know your thoughts on in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.